JSON is yet another acronym. Yay. We have so many acronyms in computer programming. It's overwhelming. And that's why it's its own little language. But JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. The S in JSON is for the S of script, even though it's one word, because I guess it would be John if they didn't put the S in there. So JSON. Where have we seen JSON? We have seen it in this course. Yeah, when we say npm init -y, we have a package JSON file created for us. This is a very specific file for Node, but the .json file is a file type you can use for your own purposes as well. So rewind back to before 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Whenever you needed data from a website or from another place on the web for your website to work, let's say my website is a movie website. It shows all the posters for every movie that's coming out. I'm probably getting all that data from a server that already stores it. And so how is data transferred from some remote database, maybe 1,000 miles away, and how do I get it and make it show up for the user? Well, in the past, this was done through something called XML. XML is like literally sending an HTML file with its CSS and everything included to your browser so you can show it. But the bad thing about XML and some of the things that would have to be done with it is the page would have to refresh every time you go and get more data, making it kind of a clunky experience for the user. So in the last 10 years, JSON is starting to become more of the breadwinner of this. This JSON is how data is passed across the web. How do I get data to and from a database? It's in this format always. So JSON is the language of transferring data. And it is JavaScript object notation. So they made this language look almost exactly like a JavaScript object, so it's easier to just jump in and start using. But let's look at what it looks like and how it works. So I'm going to make my own file here. I'm going to call this data.json. This is my own little JSON file. I could call it whatever I want as long as it has the .json extension. Well, just like the package JSON, you can't declare your JSON object. I can't say object equals brackets. Doesn't know what I'm talking about. When you're in JSON land, all you say is, here's your object. You start off as an object like that. So we're using the same brackets as JavaScript, and let's say we're making a JavaScript object that had a name equal to Morty. The only difference between a JavaScript object and a JSON object is that both the keys and the value pairs have to be wrapped in double quotes. It's a very strict notation. If you use single quotes or backticks, it'll break the entire file. So first big difference, key value pairs must both be in double quotes. Rule, yeah, it's the first main rule for the syntax. Second rule, if I'm going to add another entry, I must add a comma, just like a JavaScript object. So let's make an age now equal to 20. And oops, I just broke a rule. Not really. Let's talk about it. So this comma, this is what we're focusing on here. If I'm adding another entry, I have to put a comma. However, if I put a comma after my last entry, that will also break it. Very strict. And it will let you know if this comma is not expected. This is not JSON format. That is JSON format. Why doesn't the 20 have to be in double quotes? It's a number. So I misspoke where the values are. If it's a string, it has to be in double quotes, but all keys must be in double quotes. So to show you, if I had a Boolean like is alive, the key is still double quotes, but I can use the pure Boolean word. And if it's an array, let's say they have friends, I can still use array with all the string values inside having to be in double quotes. So if it had an object, let's say this person had an address, how would this object have to look? Still double quotes, yeah, so street, double quotes. If it's a string, 1, 2, 3, ABC street. So JavaScript object notation, the main rules. All keys must be in double quotes, and if the value is a string, it must be in double quotes. Numbers and booleans can be written explicitly as they are. Other rule, you cannot put a comma after your last entry. That will break it. As far as data types that this can hold, it can hold strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, and objects. It cannot hold functions. JavaScript objects can have functions because they have methods, but JSON, JavaScript object notation, is for transferring data only, not transferring functionality. So I can transfer this object to my website, but then on my website, I write the functions that actually use it. So I can't give this a method like speak that's equal to a function. This is invalid JSON. So when you're first writing JSON, it's the game of getting lost in brackets and quotes. So there are tools online to help you know whether or not your JSON is valid. If we go into the website here, it is called JSONlint, I believe. Yeah, JSONlint.com. I'll write it here. Validate your JSON with JSONlint.com. Because what I can do here is here's my little validator window. I can take my JSON and do a copy paste and hit validate. And if it's good, we get this green, your JSON is valid string to show up. But let's say I added that last comma that I said will break it. And then I say validate. Now it's saying parse error on line 8. It doesn't like this comma. So that's showing that one breaking, and then let's say one of my keys were wrapped in single quotes instead of double quotes. And I'll try to validate, and it says error on line 5, which is not exactly there. It's right before the issue. But just to show, this is a great tool where you can quickly validate, am I writing this correctly? And validate it and see. So why is this important? For the rest of the course, starting this afternoon, we'll make requests from servers, whether they be at vSchool or on the other side of the world. And when we ask the server for some data, it'll come back looking like this. This is what we'll get back. Then we can convert it to a JavaScript object and use it in our application. Any questions on the basics of JSON, how it's formatted or set up? A full name? Yeah, I could change the keys. I could say, instead of just keeping name, I could say, give me a first name, which is Marty, a last name, that is something. And when you request from a server, let's say I need an array of all the movies that just came out, so I'd like to show them to my user. It'll give me an array of objects that look like this. I'll convert that into JavaScript, and then I can do a for loop over it and generate that content for the user. But what's nice about this is I just make one request, and the server sends me maybe 10,000 lines of JSON I didn't have to create. I just have to create the for loop that uses it and puts it on the page. So we're getting to the moment in the course where we don't have to manually be giving ourselves all our own data. We get to start taking it from other places. So after lunch, we're going to do some practice with this. There's a Star Wars API and there's a Pokemon API we'll play with just to see, how do we get data from one of these. There's thousands of APIs out there we can request from. And by the end of the course, you'll be making your own. So JSON will be a continuing theme for the rest of your development life or foreseeable future. I missed one rule here, double quotes, and then no commas after the final entry. And that's the gist of JSON. That's how JSON works. That's what it's for. There's no other gotchas or functional problems or things with it. The hardest thing with JSON is getting the data you want, because you will get objects that may have something like, let's say we requested this user, we get a hobbies array, and each hobby is an object that has a type, swimming. And best times to do this is maybe an array of different times in the day. And this can get more nested and more nested and more nested, depending on how complex your data is. But the gist of it is it's an object. The syntax is very similar, just with the minor differences of double quotes and commas, and not having to declare what it is. So we want you to practice typing out a JSON object just to get familiar with the syntax. So I said this was a quick one. That's literally all the content listed.